Thank you. Hello, everyone. Come on in, fill it up. So, UserTesting, it's probably the world's leading experience research platform. And really, its whole purpose is to enable companies to understand what it's like to be their customer. They do that by allowing you to talk to anyone in the world in real time, or test your ideas through, or your prototypes asynchronously using the technology. As a company, we have offices in North America, Europe, Asia, and Australia. And we've got customers, over 3,000, spread out all over the world. Now, in 2023, we merged with another industry leader, UserZoom. And a result of that, those companies coming together, is that we now have about 800 employees. About a quarter of that is the engineering, design, product organization. Product and design alone, it's about 60 people. In design, we have 30 folks, and that's spread between designers, researchers, and writers. Hello, everyone. I'm Jason Giles, and I run that design team. And we've been on a mission to kind of drink our own champagne, practice what we preach for the past 5 years. It hasn't always been easy. We've learned a lot along the way, and today I'd like to share with you basically how we do it, the lessons that we've learned. I'm a big believer in enabling more in the company, those folks on the front lines making those day-to-day decisions to be able to get that direct feedback themselves. But why is that? So in a survey that we ran recently, industry survey, we found that 2/3 of research projects received 0 research support. For product managers, half of them are saying they're releasing products into the market without having any idea of how they're going to be received. On marketing teams, again, half of all marketing collateral gets put out to the customers without any type of customer vetting. It's a lot of guessing. And while I'd love to use these statistics to argue for hiring a huge army of researchers, the economic reality proves that it's just not a viable option. Now more than ever, teams are being asked to do more with less, and honestly, my team's no different. I will admit that my research to design PM ratios actually is pretty good. Some would be jealous. But I assure you that some of the lessons that we've learned, some of the practices that we do, are even applicable for much smaller teams. So I ask you to bear with me. So what I'd like to talk to you about today is what I call scaling user insight. Another word for this is research democratization. But effectively what I mean is it's a method to systematically drive more customer-informed decisions. So before I dig in, let's just go back a little bit in history. I joined 5 years ago. This was our office in San Francisco. And when I joined, the idea of connecting non-researchers directly with customers wasn't a new concept. The founders, in fact, that's how they built the first products. So obviously I wasn't surprised when I came in and you had designers and PMs and marketing people performing all these tests. But when I would come in and I start looking closer at the product, I saw a lot of questionable design decisions. And frequently I would get this refrain, "Don't worry, Jason, we tested it." Well, I had access to the tests. And so as I went back and looked at these tests, what I quickly found wasn't super thrilling. Would frequently find honestly biased questions, or decent questions, but the analysis was pretty suspect, faulty conclusions, Or honestly, what was worse, great questions, really solid results, but a failure to actually make a decision and act on them. And at the time, we actually had a really great research team, young, scrappy, but they were spending their time not on answering the big strategic questions that the company was really need to know. They were much more focused on some of these tactical things. So, first, I don't want to disparage that early team. They had a great attitude, their heart was in the right place, great intent. But the reality is that the practice that they were doing was inconsistent, and the results, well, the quality wasn't what we wanted. It was a little bit like giving musical instruments and handing them out to a class of young people, and then expecting something amazing. I mean, it's not actually really fair. What was true with user testing is also true with a lot of companies that are going on the same journey. They often fail to realize that scaling insights, it's a process of transformation. It's not just about buying some tools and handing them out. You know, it's a lot like other transformations that companies do, like Agile. You don't become agile just by adopting some tools, some ceremonies. It's a process. It's about a change of mindset, and it requires a little bit of planning, some thoughtful design, implementation, and nurturing. So, clearly we had our work cut out for us. So the first thing that I did was I sat down with our leadership team. We talked about the current state, and then we had a very real conversation around what did we want from the program. And for us, we wanted less guessing, less debate in the day-to-day decisions. We wanted to build this habit, integrate into the way that we work, build a muscle almost. We wanted our researchers to use their huge throbbing brains against the big problems that our customers really, or that our company really needed to answer. But probably more than anything else, we wanted to deliver better products that drove tangible value back to the business. There's a couple ways that we can go around this approach, and we had that conversation as well with the leadership team. In my experience, there's effectively two ways. The first one is an education and training approach. The metaphor that you might think of is an orchestra, where you spend a lot of time developing the skills of non-researchers, highly choreographed, everything planned out, with ultimately the goal of being a perfection. And this is completely appropriate approach. I've done this in the past for companies that might have a very low risk tolerance, or a more centralized organization with maybe a little bit more top-down decision-making. Typically, to do this, you invest up front in a training curriculum, and you gate the actual application behind different levels of certification. It's a completely valid approach. The other approach still requires a little bit guidelines and some structure and architecture, but allows for much more flexibility. This is great for companies who have maybe a more culture of learning by doing, or who have a little bit higher tolerance for risk. And in practice, typically what this means is you're developing a few templates, some guardrails, and you're spending much more time developing personal relationships with those specific folks and developing that person and those specific skill sets. So with the leadership team, we've hey, for user testing, jazz band feels more appropriate, and we agree on our goals. The next step was to look at our tool set. I don't think it'll be any surprise. Obviously, our software is kind of the foundation, but we work within a full ecosystem of other software. One, we've got special purpose tools. We also take advantage of multiple analytics platforms. And all of us work within planning, scheduling, documentation platforms. And the real key here is looking at that all in context and thinking about, are there key integrations? Are there key workflows of making this all work together? And that's where we spent a lot of our time. One, to optimize the way that we work, we can find those spots to apply those critical quality controls. And then critically, to ensure that the user insights, those findings, are integrated back into where people actually work. So with an outline of the tools and some possible workflows, our next step was to take a really good look at how we develop our product. This might look familiar. It's an abstract of a product development process. But what we did is we looked across the PDLC and we identified what type of research activities supports this product development. And very quickly we determined that, look, for researchers, they need to be focused much earlier in the process, where things are much more higher risk if mistakes are made. But we'd focus our scale program more around the ideation and solution space. And we actually set a goal. We said, hey, for evaluative research, let's see if we can have 80% of evaluative research being driven by non-researchers. The next thing we did was look at how we were structured. This is our world. We've got 4 main domains. Each one of those domains has about 6 teams or squads. And if you zoom in into one of those squads, you've got a designer, a PM, and roughly around 6 engineers. So if a domain roughly has about 50 people, and what we did is we established an oversight triumvirate, focusing on at that domain level. And what these folks do is they meet bi-weekly. And among other things that they discuss is what they're doing is they're reviewing the questions that are coming up from these domain teams. And they're making a decision if it is a more strategic question or might take a more complex method to answer. That gets added to the research calendar, where a researcher is going to take the lead on that. If, however, it's a more basic question, it gets assigned to a designer, a PM, a writer, and it gets added into their course of workflow so that they can plan that into their sprint activities. Now, what's great about this as well is the transparency that this crew has over all of the research activities that's happening, so they can ensure that the decisions that are made are properly informed. But we don't just set them loose. We have built a full set of different support structures, documentation. They go through a very light boot camp, but we focus more so on high-level overviews, guides, best practices, even micro content so that they can be consumed just when they need it. We've actually built the kind of boot camp into our new employee onboarding and baked it into actually our career ladders for designers, writers, product managers. So there's an expectation that they have a basic need or a basic skill set to be able to ask really valid questions. And of course, we set up appropriate pairing where each team knows exactly who their researcher is. And in some cases, we will actually do some pairing between a more senior designer and somebody who has never done their own test before. And then we've got some support channels. What's interesting about this is that because of the relationship between the researcher and their teams, we've actually found that we've been able to deprecate some of the channels because they're simply not needed anymore. So, next step, we've got this sketch of what the program looks like. We find a volunteer team, and we run a pilot. And as we go through, one, it's great. We get this opportunity to iterate and get that feedback. But I think probably more important was that these folks became advocates and champions of the program. They could speak from firsthand experience. They became another level of support. All right, so that was kind of our program design. But to see how it actually plays out in practice, I'd like to walk you guys through a case study of a feature that we recently released. So as you might remember, UserTesting and UserZoom, they merged. So for the past year, we've been focusing, how do we bring these products together to provide a single platform? Internally, we call this UTZ. And so using our new model, researchers really took the lead in the beginning around going through 10 years of prior research from each one of the research repositories. And what they did was they synthesized it and they presented it back out to our new combined leadership team. Now, this was really important because it ensured that everybody had the same understanding, the strengths and weaknesses of both of those platforms. And then they went out and talked to more customers. Because it was one thing for us to have an understanding, but with the two companies coming together, what's the expectation of customers? And they found out, probably what you'd guess, people want the best of both worlds. And so before we got into actual formal product strategy and product planning, we wanted to understand if the new product that we were going to put out into the world was better than what was existing in there. So we benchmarked both platforms. This also gave us additional justification or evidence to fix things as we brought them together. Now, once we moved into formal product planning, we knew that we couldn't do everything at once. So our designers did a bunch of low-fidelity conceptual illustrations and descriptions of key functionality. And what we did is we went out to customers and we said, how do these compare against each other in terms of value? And what we came back with was a very clear understanding of where we should be prioritizing. And one of the key capabilities that came back, surveys. So with all that foundational information, we handed it off to our survey team. And one of the first questions they had, like, okay, this is great, but where do we start? What capabilities need to be involved? So the team, the designers, the PMs, did their own desk research. They also did formal competitive analysis to understand who was doing what and who was doing it well. They also ideated a whole bunch of other approaches or ideas. But what quickly happens, I'm sure you can experience this, is there's disagreement on the team around what we should focus on. And so it was at this point that they reached out to their researcher, and she lined up a set of customer interviews. Now, what was nice about this was she used this as an opportunity to plan and design the study together with the team. They were included as part of the note-taking, part of the analysis. And they got really strong signals of what should be included, but the team wanted to be more confident. So the researcher did some quantitative surveys that really let the team know, yes, what we heard with the qualitative, it's a really strong signal, you should go ahead. And with that, they moved into ideation. And as they brought these capabilities together, high-level flows, what we began to emerge was a possibility that perhaps there was a new navigation system. And so they had these concepts, but what they wanted to inform was they performed a card sort study. Now, if you're not familiar with card sorts, it's a really effective method to group, label, organize content and actions in a way that matches a user's mental model. So they took this and they pulled it in to the flow. What was nice about this actually was that they some of the assumptions they were making turned out it wasn't true. But because it was so early in the process, making a change was a breeze. So this led to actually building out some lightweight prototypes and doing full prototype testing or navigation testing with these to ensure that the flows were working, additional friction came out. What happens frequently on design teams and product teams is that there's actually multiple viable solutions to a particular product interaction. And this, again, can lead to a lot of discussion, debate. So that's where high-level prototype A/B testing really helped the team out. You know, sometimes in a matter of hours, they were able to like, hey, do we go this direction? And it cut the chatter, cut the churn. And so with all these design decisions starting to fall into place, they moved into full end-to-end concept tests, again, finding opportunities to remove friction. It is at this point, I'm just going to share a little unique experience that we have at UserTesting. So you can imagine you're a designer, you're within the UserTesting UI, and you're showing new UserTesting UI that might actually have components of the new UI in it. It's a little crazy making. We call it Inception. I imagine it's what the Figma designers must experience when they're designing their UI and their product. But I digress. So as the designers are working through the details of the design, our writers, they're testing terminology. Now, it's often taken for granted, but the words that are used within our product have a dramatic impact on the overall experience. And so that's why terminology testing can be so helpful, especially actually taking the words outside of the context of the product. This is also true with marketing terms. So as the core product team is focused on that, it's interesting, David's talk about working cohesively and working with the marketing. Our marketing teams, they're running tests. They're running tests on different messaging, on product naming. And the insights that they're finding are coming back to the core product team to inform continuity across the end-to-end experience. So with all this feedback and this iteration coming together, the team performs some final usability tests. Just as the development is really getting all wrapped up. And it's at this point that our researcher steps back in, and she takes the lead on running an internal alpha. Now that activity, it surfaced a bunch of additional fixes that were required to go. But the team was able to address those issues. And so an MVP was handed out to an eager set of audiences in a form of a formal beta. The team learned there that the issues that we found in alpha, they had all been addressed, but probably more valuable was just the sheer excitement once folks saw the new capability. And this convinced the team, okay, it's time to, let's go broad. Before we talk about the impact of that work, let's go back, step back a little bit, and remember what the goals of the overall program were. We wanted to see less guessing in the day-to-day decisions. We wanted to integrate the way that this feedback was collected into the way people were working. We wanted a better use of our researchers' time. And ultimately, we wanted to deliver a better experience, but that actually impacted positively back to the business. So how'd we do? For the survey project, we ran 33 studies. We engaged with over 1,200 customers, non-customers, internal employees. We surveyed over 6,000 people. That's over 7,200 perspectives that went into shaping the survey feature. If you look at all the testing that we were doing at that time, I think in Q2 2023, we were running around 10 studies a quarter. We are now running consistently at 26 at a smooth rate. That's a pretty big increase. And this isn't just the survey team. Every team, every product team at UserTesting is performing their own testing. What about our researchers? Well, one, we hit our goal. 81% of evaluative research is now being performed by non-researchers, which means that our researchers are spending their time prioritizing roadmaps, doing user need discovery, understanding new markets, trends, changing attitudes. And the experience itself, remember that benchmark that we ran? We had a QX score of 71. After the release of the survey's feature, 8 points. We dramatically improved the experience. But I think what's even more impressive was that within the first 4 months of the launch of surveys, we had a 36% increase in usage across the entire platform. The feature itself received 25% adoption. That's the fastest adoption rate we've had of any feature in the company's history. And all of that resulted in $4 million in attributable revenue in the first quarter. That's better experience driving real business impact. So, for those who are considering thinking about how to enable more within your companies to be able to get firsthand feedback, let's recap some of the things we learned. First, scaling research, it's a process. It's about transformation, requires some thoughtful design, and it needs to be designed for your company. I've got a colleague, he likes to say, one size fits one. You need to think about the goals and meet early with your executive sponsors or those that are in your camp that are going to be helping cheerlead and support this program. You need to think about both the goals, but then also the approach. Is it more appropriate to create an orchestra, or are you more of a jazz band? Take a look at your tools and your processes. I would say critically think about how those user insights are coming back into the tools where people are working every day so they can make those decisions. It's in their face. You're going to want to determine the right quality controls, the right levels of support that you need, depending on your company's risk tolerance. And then finally, pilot, iterate, roll out, but then continue to nurture, continue to refine. I am incredibly proud of what we've accomplished to date, but we're still iterating, we're still learning. We've assembled this great set of players, and they're good, and we're getting good rhythm going. We've got some room for improvisation. The momentum, tempo is building, but we're not done. We're going to be continuing to revise, assess. As our company continues to change, we're going to need to adjust to make sure that we still are hitting the goals that we need for the company. But I am convicted now more than ever that success for delivering experiences that drive business value is absolutely, it hinges on getting more people direct customer feedback, because they're the ones that are making those experience decisions day by day. It just needs a little planning, some thoughtful design, some nurturing. It's been a pleasure to kind of peel back the curtain a little bit. I hope that it sparked an idea or two for you and your teams. I'm actually here with Becky White, who's off stage. She's my head of research ops. Please come track us down, one with questions or share your experience. We'd love to hear about it. Also, if you'd like to give us feedback on our products, this is our panel. So we would love you to join, whether you're a customer or not, because we, like you saw, we talk to a lot of our customers and non-customers. So with that, I think we have some time for questions. Julia.